Paranormal Podcast is brought to you by Parabox Monthly. Every paranormal enthusiast will love
This is Art?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I just ran out of my room. The radio's on in there. You're getting stomped on real hard. I'm calling from Oregon. This is Donna, KRRM. Just a lot of bleed over of another station, totally cutting you out. Anyway, I've been trying to get a hold of you forever to see if you would have Thunder Striking on again.
Thunder Striking. Yes. Yes. You mean the man who
did the shadow people?
Did the shadow people? Yes.
I don't know. I've never had any, seen any shadow people or any of that kind of thing. But I had when I was younger, I woke up with the Cape guy standing by me and couldn't move and couldn't scream. And
well, what do you mean Cape guy? You mean Mothman?
The black guy that in like a monk's robe.
Are you talking about Mothman?
No. When Thunder Striking was talking about the different pictures that people were sending in, he described the guy in like a monk's robe and a black face. You couldn't see a face. And he said, well, I can't talk about that one. That's a whole other show. It was like a black military project. And that's the only thing that honestly, that I was interested in because I haven't seen shadow people. And I just wanted to see if you could get him back on to do that. This was before everything happened with the Twin Towers and all that. And I figured, military, maybe you couldn't do it.
Let me tell you something. Since we opened the subject of the shadow people, it has never stopped. Every day I have, ma'am, I have dozens of shadow people stories and emails. And I mean dozens.
Think this thing wasn't a shadow person, so I'm really curious to know what it was.
Well, yeah, but I think they're all sort of from the same neighborhood.
Okay, well, he was saying it's a military project, and it was a whole different show, and it was gunning.
All right.
Thunder Striking.
Yes, I remember Thunder Strikes. Oh, I see Graham may be at a different telephone number. I've been handed a note. Well, we'll see if we can get him here at the bottom of the hour. First-time caller line, you are on the air. Hello.
Hi, Art. This is Nathan from Joplin.
Yes.
All right. I've got a possible proposition. It might explain all of the strange things with cancer and whatnot.
A possible proposition. Well, let's see. For 30 years, a 400% increase for men and 300% for women. What's your thought?
Well, our bodies are affected in ways that we don't even understand. Chinese medicine has, for hundreds and hundreds of years, known that different organs are more active or more delicate at certain points in the day, and it goes in a specific 24-hour cycle. Acupuncture and all that. Now, you understand that we are electromagnetic, we have electromagnetic energy, and thus we're magnetic bodies, in a sense.
Yes.
Well, all smaller electromagnetic bodies, or all magnetic bodies, they're always governed by larger ones. There's the lunar cycle that, women and you know what I'm talking about there, right?
Well, you're mixing things up here a little bit. And probably getting off into an area that will just get you in trouble for no reason when you're trying to make a bigger point. So you want to reorient yourself here. We're all electromagnetic beings, sir. I agree with that. Electrical impulses flow through our body and to our brains and all the rest of it. So anybody who doesn't think we're affected by the earth and the sun and all of the things around us are out of their minds. Simple as that.
Okay, well, I totally agree. You talking about the cat earlier finding its way home?
Yes.
Carrier pigeons actually find their way to wherever they're going by, the brain actually senses the electromagnetic lines in the earth.
Well, that may be. That's kind of a theory, and we're not altogether sure that's true. It may well be true. But it does not answer how an animal, electromagnetic lines or not. I mean, that certainly answers how a migratory animal might migrate, right? But it does not answer how an animal finds an owner hundreds or thousands of miles away. It would have absolutely no way whatsoever of understanding where that owner is or has moved to abruptly. And yet these animals find their way back to their owners. Now, clearly something else is at play here. Not just magnetic lines on the Earth, but something really far from our understanding as human beings is going on. Wildcard line, you're on the air. Hello.
Yeah, all right.
Yes.
You were talking earlier
Turn
about...
your radio off, please.
off.
Yes.
You're talking about animal communicators, but you ever talk about animals who communicate?
Well, you couldn't have animal communicators without animals that communicate, right?
Well, I've had several animals that communicated very clearly.
What kind of animals?
A beagle hound.
A big old hound?
Beagle hound.
A beagle hound. All right. What did your beagle hound
Well,
communicate to you?
She'd take off, and I'd call her, stop in the middle of the street, look over her shoulder, and put her tail right straight up in the air and give you the freeway salute.
No.
Oh, yes.
No.
Not just one, I've had several.
Now, you're implying that your dog would understand what that salute means.
Well, she stood down at the cross. Not just one, I've got several people who do.
Did they all give you the same salute?
Yes,
All right, well, I'm not going there, but you might want to, I don't know, improve your animal communication skill. I mean, obviously is something you're doing wrong, if they're really doing that. Graham Hancock, next, maybe.
Once in her life, she musters a smile for his nostalgic tale. Never coming near what you wanted to say, only to realize it never really was. She had a place in his life.
Seasons don't feel the reaper, nor do the wind, the sun, or the rain. Come on, baby, baby, take my hand. You'll be able to fly. Baby, I'm your man.
Call Art Bell in the Kingdom of Nye from west of the Rockies at 1-800-618-8255. East of the Rockies, 1-800-825-5033. First-time callers may reach Art at 1-775-727-1222. And the wildcard line is open at 1-775-727-1295. To reach Art on the toll-free international line, call your AT&T operator and have them dial 800-893-0903. This is Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell from the Kingdom of Nye.
It is indeed. Graham Hancock, is author of the major international bestsellers, The Sign and the Seal, Fingerprints of the Gods, and Heaven's Mirror. His books now have sold more than 5 million copies worldwide and have been translated into 27 languages. His public lectures and TV appearances, including the 3-hour series Quest for the Lost Civilization, have put his ideas before audiences of tens of millions. He has become recognized as an unconventional thinker who raises legit questions about humanity's history and prehistory and offers an increasingly popular challenge to the entrenched views of orthodox scholars. And I will get into this in a moment, but clearly for archaeologists, lately the world has been falling apart. Born in Edinburgh, Scotland, Hancock's early years were spent in India, where his father worked as a surgeon. Later he went to school and university in the northern English city of Durham. Graduated from Durham University in '73 with first-class honors in sociology. Went on to pursue a career in quality journalism, writing for many of Britain's leading newspapers, including The Times, Sunday Times, Independent, Guardian, co-editor of the New Internationalist magazine from '76 through '9, and East Africa correspondent of The Economist. Boy, are they big in Europe. 81 through '83, my goodness. His breakthrough after first starting to write, bestseller came in '92 with publication of The Sign and the Seal. His epic investigation into the mystique and whereabouts of the Ark of the Lost Covenant, Fingerprints of the Gods, published in 95, now has sold more than 3 million copies and continues to be in demand about the world. Subsequent works such as Keeper of Genesis, The Message of the Sphinx in the U.S. with co-author Robert Goval, and Heaven's Mirror with photographer, I believe it's Santha Feja, have also been #1 bestsellers, and on and on and on. In a moment, coming up, Graham Hancock. Now, here we are again, the law of unintended consequences. 2 things. One, Graham appears to have been at a different number than the one I had. We'll find out about that in a moment. And check this out for cool. During the time I was reading Graham's biographical information here, I dropped a cigarette cherry squarely in my lap. So some of you out there will know what that is. Trying to do an ear candle job on my privates or something. Now, did I remain fairly calm or what? Anybody want to check and see if there appears to be a large comet headed for Earth at the moment? These have been strange times. Hey, Graham, God, good to hear your voice again.
Nice to hear yours too, Art. It's been a while.
Now that I've hered it, you're going to have to stay a little away from the phone there.
Okay, I'll try to keep it away. I think I put new rechargeable batteries in my old telephone, and it's now too loud.
I see. Is that a portable phone?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Do you have one that you can pick up?
I don't. They're all hands-free.
I see. All right. Well, anyway, it's good to hear you again. And you know, I started out, Graham, by saying that the last couple of years, and it's been a while since you and I have spoken.
It is.
They've been very bad times for archaeologists worldwide. I mean, things are beginning to be seen and researched all over the place that would seem to indicate that mankind has been here a lot longer than they've been telling us.
Well, certainly civilized mankind.
Yes.
There have been new discoveries, new finds, changes. There's a lot that's being shaken up at the moment, and I think we're going to see some very interesting times ahead.
Oh, why, Graham, did we not find you at the telephone number we had listed for you?
Okay, here's the thing. I have 2 places. I live most of my time in the West Country of England, in Devon, very far from any town. But sometimes I have to be in London, so we have a small place here, and when I have to work in London, we come up and stay here.
Nice.
And I had given the London numbers, but I think what happened was that you've been trying my numbers in Devon.
I see.
That's it, really.
I see. Okay, easy enough. Anyway.
Easy enough, yeah. Well, luckily I had your hotline, so I called in.
Now, as you've seen all of this stuff unfolding, you know, all of these new discoveries, I suppose you've heard about off the coast of Cuba and all the rest of that?
Absolutely, yeah. The Cabo San Antonio, very interesting, yeah.
You must feel somewhat vindicated.
I think it's too early to go around feeling vindicated. But what I feel is that the basic proposition that I put forward, which is that there was a higher level of civilization, perhaps much higher than we've expected way back in the Ice Age, and that an urban city-dwelling culture, a culture that had reached that level, was destroyed by the rising sea levels at the end of the Ice Age, and that we're going to find the remains of it underwater. That seems to be being supported by evidence at the moment, but we need to do a whole lot more work on these places, and there's a lot of bridges to cross yet, but it's looking good.
All right, well, we're all hearing about Cuba, and we're waiting for information on that. What can you tell us about what's been found off the coast of India?
Well, what's been found off the coast of India, you have 2 separate sites. You have sites in the northwest of India, and you have sites as quite as far away from those as you can get and still be in India, in the southeast of India. And I've been following both of these areas as a diver and as a researcher for several years now. What happened in May of 2001 was that one of India's government agencies, the National Institute of Ocean Technology, which specializes in high-tech instrumentation for remote surveys on the seabed, was conducting a survey in a place called the Gulf of Cambay in northwest India. Now, they were not doing archaeology.
They were there actually testing the pollution levels in the Gulf of Cambay.
Mm-hmm.
And they were using an instrument called side-scan sonar, which sends out a beam down to the seabed and which bounces back an image of what's on the seabed.
Gee whiz, just like in Cuba.
Just like in Cuba, side-scan sonar. However, it's gone a lot further than that. So back in May last year, they were doing this survey and they started to notice very regular geometrical formations on the seabed. They had geologists with them and they just couldn't understand what these things were. They were about 120 feet down and they were very extensive, and they focused their survey in that area, followed this up, and they found that what they seemed to be sitting on top of were two cities, roughly 5 miles long and about a mile wide, laid out alongside an ancient riverbed, parallel to each other but about 15 miles apart. And to give a sense of the size of these cities, if you added them both together, you would have a city the size of Manhattan.
Oh my God.
Now, this is very extraordinary, and it was a very extraordinary discovery at the time because the depth of submergence suggests that these are very old. But when the National Institute of Ocean Technology went public with its findings in May last year, nobody took them seriously because the suggestion that there could have been fantastic cities of this scale thousands and thousands of years ago, and which had been covered up by water, was just too difficult for archaeologists to swallow. And they suffered a lot of ridicule at that time. But they didn't give up, and they went back with their research vessel, and they pulled up using, in fact, a mechanical grab. They pulled up, they put themselves over the top of the cities, and they pulled up from the seabed more than 2,000 man-made artifacts, including pottery, jewelry, even human remains, teeth, bones, a vertebrae, a jawbone, wonderful things.
Wow! How would human remains last that long? I can understand some other artifacts, but human remains—that's amazing.
In fossilized form, yeah, they do, and these were fossilized, and they had lasted because they ran carbon dating tests on pieces of cut wood that were found amongst these artifacts. The wood was perfectly preserved. Right. And the date that they got from the carbon dating, which is a standard archaeological tool, and I'm often accused of ignoring it, but a date that was given by carbon dating was 9,500 years ago, 7,500 BC. That's about 4,000 years older than any city known to archaeologists anywhere in the world. And it suddenly led to a huge jump in the seriousness with which these ruins on the bottom of the Gulf of Cambay were taken, because no longer could it be said that they were simply an artifact of the imaging process or some kind of scientific hallucination. Once you pull 2,000 artifacts out of them, it obviously and logically enormously increases the possibility that they're man-made. And in fact, nobody in India is in serious doubt about that now. Well, so we're dealing with something that confounds the established picture of history, because we're supposed to have started developing cities 5,000 or less than 5,000 years ago, with the gradual growth and emergence of civilization, which has always been thought to have started in the Fertile Crescent in the Middle East near Iraq.
Oh yes.
And now suddenly thousands of years earlier, we have these cities which simply can't be explained.
Our educational institutions around the world have not yet begun to respond. In other words, what they're teaching in school with regard to archaeology and our past remains virtually unchanged.
I would expect that to be so for quite a while. It's going to take the archaeological community about 5 years, I would guess, to digest this new information. First off, they have to get rid of all their objections to it and satisfy themselves that it is a genuine discovery, which I have no doubt that they'll do, and then come to terms with what it means. If it is what it seems to be, I think any archaeologist would agree that it turns over the established story of the origins of civilization.
Well, in what way? In what way do you think they will now explain what they know about man's presence on the planet in such manner? I mean, what are they?
You have to understand that the first, for archaeologists who are invested in the present view of the past, which is a straight line development from rather simple and primitive beginnings through a nice series of gradual evolutionary steps until we get cities and eventually end up with what we have today. That such an idea simply cannot accommodate cities that are 9,000 years old at the bottom of the Gulf of Cambay. And in fact, I have to stress that the date on those cities, which is retrieved from carbon-dated artifacts, is supported by sea level studies, because there's a whole science which studies the extent to which sea level rose at the end of the last ice age. And this science puts the submergence of the Gulf of Cambay round about 7,700 years ago. So it means that the cities there couldn't have been built before that date, and so the carbon date of about 1,500 years older than that makes sense.
All right. Well, maybe you can describe.
To answer your question, very difficult for archaeologists to accommodate themselves to this. So the first thing we're going to see is several years of intense critical focus on these finds to see if they can be dismissed. That'll be the first thing to happen.
But if it's confirmed, and we're now 5 or 10 years later, what conclusions do we draw about ourselves, and what changes in thinking, in what kind of circles will this create?
Well, for me, first and foremost, what it means is that the vast heritage of mythology that we have from all around the world, which testifies to global floods, and which has been scorned and ignored by archaeologists as irrelevant to archaeological research. This is going to have to change.
Yes.
Because we're looking at a phenomenon. The work that I've been doing for the last 5 years has been following up every possible lead in this area of underwater structures, and I'm a diver, and I've been diving on structures all around the world. And there is evidence for massively ancient underwater structures in almost all parts of the world. So this looks like the global traces of a cataclysmic event, or a series of cataclysmic events. And
well,
I think
there's still Okinawa that they're trying to figure out, and now, of course, Cuba. And I know that you've seen the reports on Cuba, and in the case of Cuba, Graham, it's 2,200 feet.
Yes, Cuba is fascinating. Whatever it is, it's a very deep site. Now, we have to realize with a site that's submerged to a depth of 2,200 feet, that we are not dealing solely with the issue of sea level rise at the end of the ice age.
Obviously not.
Because that would account at the most for 400 feet of submersion.
I've heard some people say as much as 900, but certainly no more, nowhere near 2,200.
Nowhere near 2,200 and nowhere near 900 too, except that you do get variations around the world simply because of land subsidence and land elevation, which occurs in all of these places at the same time that the sea is going up and down. But generally speaking, you wouldn't find a greater depth of submersion than about 400 feet, which is a very great depth. As a result of sea level rise. So if these cities are submerged to 2,200 feet, the most logical conclusion to draw is that they must have been carried down to that depth in some kind of underwater landslide. This is possible. Apparently, it's particularly possible in that area. But of course, I'm jumping ahead of the finds and assuming that these are man-made structures. They may not be. They may not be man-made. I have a feeling, I hope, they are.
Well, all right. Let's go back to India then for a second, with the artifacts that have been brought up. If we go out on a limb and speculate about what it was like for the people on that land that's now so far below water, what do we imagine it was like?
Well, the clearest signature of what kind of people they were comes from the character of the buildings that they've left behind, which are now on the seabed. And these are very extensive structures with huge walls and massive foundations. There's another technique called sub-bottom profiling, which will kind of takes an X-ray of the sea bottom and looks at what's underneath the bottom. And what sub-bottom profiling has shown on these structures in the Gulf of Cambay is that they have massive foundations, very, very strong, and probably made of very large blocks of stone. The character of the walls that are left above water is just huge. It's on an enormous scale and very geometrical with lots of right angles in it, and you can see clear shapes of large, square, and rectangular constructions. Now, for a society to put all of this together 9,000 or more years ago, you have to understand that at that period of the past, what archaeology says we're dealing with is just small villages and settlements.
Yes.
The very largest that you might find, well-known places like Jericho and Kefalhayak in Turkey, which are both known early settlements, are about 150 times smaller than what we find on the bottom of the Gulf of Cambay. So it's completely out of context and perspective in the period to which it's applied. Now, even beyond that, you have to, when you look at a big city, you have to ask yourself, how did those people support themselves? How did they eat? How did they sustain themselves?
Exactly.
And it's difficult to imagine a city or cities of these sizes being established without a solid agricultural base to feed them. However, 9,000 years ago, agriculture is supposed to have been only just beginning, not have got to the stage where it could support large cities. Far from that, thousands of years away from that. So there we have another mystery, and I think it's possible that the answers to all of these mysteries are on the 10 million square miles of land that was submerged by rising sea levels around the world at the end of the Ice Age. That's an area bigger than South America and North America as far as the Canadian border added together.
Well, there are many people like myself who wonder about following, Graham. We may not have time for a good answer here, but if there are really all these undersea cities about the world, then the U.S. government with its submarines, the Russian government with its submarines, should know about these things, shouldn't they?
Well, a place where they particularly should know about them is the Persian Gulf. Because that area must be amongst the most heavily patrolled waters in the world.
Absolutely.
And the entire Persian Gulf was dry with a beautiful river running through it until about 12,000 years ago.
Right. So are you guessing they do know and have not said anything? Or
I expect I am, yeah. I expect I am. Although, frankly, the places where submarines go is not necessarily the same places that you'd expect to find submerged ruins.
Perhaps not, but
they're often in much deeper water. But I'd be very surprised if some anomalies have not been found. And indeed, we have reports from the Russians going back to the 1980s of quite a few very strange things being found in the Atlantic Ocean.
Oh, really? Okay, let's hold it right there. We're at the top of the hour. Graham Hancock is my guest from Great Britain. I'm Art Bell. This is Coast to Coast AM.
I've been drifting on the sea of heartbreak, trying to get myself ashore for so long, listening to the strangest stories, wondering where it all went wrong for so long.
Art Bell in the Kingdom of Nye. From west of the Rockies, dial 1-800-618-8255. East of the Rockies, 1-800-825-5033. First-time callers may reach Art at 1-775-727-1222. Or use the wildcard line at 1-775-727-1295. To reach Art on the toll-free international line, call your AT&T operator and have them dial 800-893-0903. This is Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell on the Premier Radio Networks.
It certainly is. Good morning. Graham Hancock from Great Britain is here, and we've had him switch phones trying to corral ourselves a little bit better connection. We might have done that. We'll see here in a moment. In a moment, Graham will be right back. Now back to Graham Hancock in Great Britain. Graham, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, oh, that sounds...
Hopefully on quiet telephone.
Oh, it sounds so much better, yes.
Oh, good.
All right, so you have
The
been...
only problem for me now is I can't pace, you see. I like to pace when I'm talking. Now I'm fixed to the chair with a fixed line. But anyway, let's go.
Do you really like to pace back and forth?
Yeah, I do. I'm a pacer. I don't know why, but I just can't take a telephone call sitting still. However, I'm doing so now. So it's a good experience for me.
All right, you've been doing an Indiana Jones thing all over the world, it seems like. Something in the Bay of Bengal. What are you doing there?
This is southeast India. We were talking a few moments ago about big cities that have been discovered underwater in northwest India.
That's right, yeah.
But right far away in the southeast of India, often a state of India called Tamil Nadu, inhabited by Tamil-speaking people, there has been another discovery. And in fact, this discovery was made by Indian archaeologists some years ago, back in 1993. They were doing a survey of ruins which were very close to shore in that area. In fact, they were so close to shore that some of them were exposed, completely exposed at low tide. And these ruins were dated accurately to not very old, between 300 BC and 300 AD. Mm-hmm. But while they were doing that survey, they also decided to look in deeper water. And they went out, again, using initially side-scan sonar, but in this case supported by diving as well, including by myself. They went out with side-scan sonar, and they found at 5 kilometers from the shore, say 3 miles out from shore, right, at a depth of 70 feet, a very large structure which shouldn't be there. They couldn't figure out what it was. It was shaped like a horseshoe, and it was shown on the side-scan sonar to be surrounded by other structures. In 93, they put down some marine archaeologists to dive on it, and they found that it was a man-made structure with courses of blocks clearly visible in the side of it under the marine growth. But they didn't know what to do with it because it was so far from shore. It didn't appear, couldn't be connected to the ruins that were inshore and much younger.
Now, you actually put on gear and went out there yourself?
Yeah, I've been diving for 5 years, and specifically in order to follow up wonderful anomalies like this. I found out about this structure in a very obscure journal published by India's National Institute of Oceanography, just like a footnote to their study on the inshore structures. And I decided this is extremely intriguing, and I have to have a look at it. It took me about a year and a half to get permission from the Indian government to dive there. But finally, last year, I went back, in fact, with a film crew, and we dived on this structure and filmed it. And it is the most fantastic, enormous structure, which archaeologists admit would have required a high technology, quote-unquote, to build.
Graham, why is it hard to get a permit to dive there?
Believe it or not, although India has fabulous coasts and a very long coastline, there is almost no leisure diving in India. There's only a couple of places in India where a scuba diver can dive.
Yeah, I understand that these were shark-infested waters.
Well, it's not only that. It's just that the scuba diving as a culture has never really developed in India. There is commercial diving, but there's no... I mean, people who are diving to free anchors and bring up salvage and so on, but there's no leisure diving. So immediately anybody diving in India has huge problems of supply, getting compressors, getting tanks, all of this kind of thing.
Yes.
You just can't do it. And as soon as you start to do it, it's referred back to the government, and they say, well, why do you want to dive? And they quite strictly control their waters. So it took a very long time to just get permission to dive there. And then because there are no logistics and no facilities, it was necessary for India's National Institute of Oceanography to go there also, to bring in a portable compressor so that we could have air in our tank.
I wonder what they're afraid of, though. I mean, I don't think
they're afraid of anything. I just think that in other places, for example, the Caribbean, where everybody dives all the time, the idea of a diver has become normalized, and people are quite used to seeing folks dressed up in masks and fins and so on. But in India, the idea of a diver is not normalized, and the immediate suspicion is, why is this person diving? Is he going to try to steal something from us? Is it some kind of security issue? This was particularly large in the Gulf of Cambay in the northwest, which is near the troubled areas of Pakistan and Afghanistan.
So I guess in every country there's a Zahi waiting somewhere, huh?
Well, yes. In the case of India, it's just rather charming and Zahi Hawass, yes, from Egypt. It's just rather charming and slow-moving. It's a sort of worst of British bureaucracy, tinged with sort of 50 years of the worst of Indian bureaucracy as well, and everything just takes a long time to happen. But in a very nice, polite way, and as long as you're patient, and there's no reason not to be patient with India because it's one of the oldest countries in the world, as long as you're patient, you will eventually get to do what you want to do, and that I did. Dived on this structure, filmed it, and we are returning there in a month's time with a full-scale expedition, again jointly with the National Institute of Oceanography, but with a lot of technical divers from Britain, in order to survey the other 27 structures that have been found nearby.
Oh my goodness.
Now what's intriguing about this structure in Southeast India is the depth of submergence on that coast. We have to remember that there's I mentioned this earlier, but there is an increasingly highly developed science which takes into account all the variables that you need to take into account to figure out what the sea level was on any particular location, anywhere in the world at any particular time. And when that program is run on this site, we find that the underwater structure that I've dived on there was submerged 11,500 years ago.
11,500 years.
That, by the way, is the same date that's given in Plato for the submergence of Atlantis in another ocean.
Well, one of the major things I think that will come crashing home to people as they realize these areas that were above ground 11,000 or 11,000 and a half years ago or whatever, even millions of years ago at 2,200 feet or whatever. I mean, if it happened once, Graham, it could happen again.
I think that's one of the most humbling lessons of this new material, which is now coming out all around the world, is that it is really possible that our ancestors reached a much higher level of development than we imagined. Perhaps they formed a different kind of civilization to the one we've created, but if they lived in cities, they were certainly a highly developed people. That this could have happened and then been forgotten.
Is it possible that along with an older civilization that went much farther than we imagined, there would have been a technology of some description that we don't fully understand today, perhaps a technology that was able to do things that we almost can't do today, like build pyramids, I don't know, whatever, that they developed some sort of probably what we would call magic today.
Yeah.
Although I'm sure it's natural to do all of this.
It's a harnessing of natural forces. Well, of course, we're entering a highly speculative area here.
Yes,
Speculation is fun. So let's speculate. Once we cross the barrier and accept that it appears that there was a whole earlier layer of civilization, which we are only just beginning to find out about, and that had reached the level of an urban civilization, then it would be very surprising if there wasn't some kind of technology involved. Simply to get an organized, complex culture that can build cities involves so many processes that it would be almost a miracle if there wasn't a technology involved. But at the same time, the evidence for this remains to be confirmed and remains to be established as to whether that's so or not. I like to think, from studying ancient texts, and in this case particularly relevant are the ancient texts of India, that we may be looking at a society which in some ways was very different from ours. If they developed technology, it would have been of a different sort. The primary interest of that society was not particularly technological or material. You can even see this in India today, that millions of people in India spend their entire lives just wandering as pilgrims from place to place, having completely renounced the world because they believe that attachment to the world slows down the progress of the soul. So we can't assume that an earlier society, an earlier civilization was as interested in technology as we are.
And perhaps not at all in the sense that we are. It may have been a very, in other words, it could have been a civilization that was based on certain beliefs, based on certain facts that we no longer understand. Correct?
I think that's exactly the way to look at it. That it raises two questions: not only the possibility that great civilizations can be destroyed and lost for thousands of years, almost without trace, but also that the pattern in which a civilization evolves is not necessarily fixed in the model that we have today. Perhaps there are other ways for this to happen. Perhaps our kind of global dominant society today is only one of many routes that human beings could take, and perhaps not even necessarily the best.
Well, sure. Isn't it rather egotistical to imagine this is the only way? With regard to the first site you were talking about, Mike in Anaheim, California asks, I hear the currents are too strong for diving on the site. How might people eventually explore the site and do so in a way which does not involve dredging for artifacts?
Right. A good question, and a good point raised in it, because dredging for artifacts is, it was necessary in this case because it was necessary to establish once and for all that these were man-made sites.
Yeah, but then you got to take the next step, right?
You got to take the next step, and dredging won't do it. Now, when I first got on to this story, which is close to a year ago now, that was when I put in my applications to dive with the National Institute of Ocean Technology, who found these structures in the Gulf of Cambay. When we went back there to film with them, which we did in just a month or two ago in December, we still did not have permission to dive in the Gulf of Cambay, and they themselves had not dived in the Gulf of Cambay. And the reason for this is these enormous currents. There's actually a 30-foot difference between high tide and low tide in the Gulf of Cambay. And the site is more than 20 miles from shore. Now, the most dangerous thing for any diver, forget about sharks, forget about anything like that, the most dangerous thing is to get carried away by a current. If you are carried off by a current and you surface half a mile from your boat, unless they have a fast recovery vessel, a launch, which can go out and pick you up, and it often can't see you if there's waves even 3 feet high.
Then you're dead.
You're dead, and there's no shore to swim to. So this is a deep site, it's 120 feet deep in places. It involves a lot of logistics and backup for diving, and for just securing that people don't die there.
It's actually almost like drifting away from a spacecraft without a tether, isn't it?
It is like drifting away from a spacecraft without a tether, and I've done it several times. And the two occasions when I've come closest to losing my life as a diver have both been because of that, of surfacing and literally not seeing the boat that you jumped on. It's gone.
God, that's got to be scary.
It is a very scary thing, and it's a scary thing when you're less than a mile from shore and have some chance to swim to shore. But it's an impossibly scary thing when you're 20 miles from shore, as is the case in the Gulf of Cambay. So very careful steps have to be taken to ensure that diving is safe there. But it can be done, and we're hoping to dive on that site with a bit of luck within the next 6 months.
Well, you'd be certainly to be commended for not only talking and researching as so many academics do, but going out there and looking for yourself. Now, you saw this with your own eyes. Is there any question at all about what you saw?
No. As far as I'm concerned, I've seen a lot more evidence on this than has so far been made public. And by the way, the story of the Indian underwater cities is hardly known about at all in the U.S. I think you must be one of the first shows to be talking about it.
Believe me, you're absolutely correct. Now, we were aware of it. We'd had the headlines fairly recently, but no details, Graham.
Yeah, that's right. The story just hasn't been picked up in the U.S. for some reason, but it will be. It'll gradually start dawning on people.
Well, same deal with the one in Cuba. The story is there if you have the right people doing the research, but it's not hitting. Well, it did briefly hit CNN, just briefly, but it's just not being embraced yet.
Yeah. That's right, and it's very difficult to embrace. See, what happens is if somebody wanting to run a news item on this on the TV, rings up some academic expert and says, well, what do you think of this story? He's going to say, it's rubbish, forget about it.
I know.
And therefore it gets forgotten about. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy until